At the edge of a small Midwestern town, the decaying church of St. Aurelia still loomed over a field of wild grass. They said that more than a century ago, the villagers knelt within its frigid nave and struck a covenant with the devil to escape famine. Each soul offered was sealed inside a candle, and the altar became an orchestra of silent screams. Though the church has long been abandoned, whenever the wind cuts across the plain, a faint yellow light still flickers through the shattered windows. And people believe that if a foolish hand ever dares to spark a flame again, the covenant will rise. And whoever lights, it will never leave hope. Ali, wow. Nathaniel pulled his car to a stop along the muddy road, his eyes fixed on the massive shadow rising from the field of wild grass. St. Aurelia Church. The stonework lay in ruins, its roof collapsed in jagged gaps, yet it still radiated a grim, funereal majesty. He opened the door, and the early autumn wind rushed in, cold and damp, carrying the scent of mildew and rust. Nathaniel was a scholar of folk religion. He had heard dozens of rumors about St. Aurelia, where, long ago, the villagers forged a dark covenant in exchange for survival. Most dismissed the stories as superstition, but he did not. In an old library in Chicago, he had unearthed a tattered manuscript that spoke of the breathing candles of this very church. From that moment, obsession clung to him, driving him here. Stepping through the rotted wooden doors, Nathaniel felt at once that the air had thickened, as if he were stepping into the chest cavity of some colossal beast. Each breath grew heavy, each footstep stretched into echoes that refused to die. He swept his flashlight across the nave. There, on the altar, dust lay thick, except for the faint marks of fingers pressed recently into its surface, withdrawn in haste. A gust of wind tore through the church, the doors groaning. And for an instant, Nathaniel was certain he saw a faint glow at the far end of the nave. He blinked, and darkness returned. His heart pounded. Nathaniel drew out his recorder, his voice whispering into it. St. Aurelia, Day 1. I can feel a presence here, and I believe the candles remain, waiting to be lit. Behind him, the darkness seemed to whisper back, soft and sibilant, in a tongue that did not belong to man. No. Nathaniel moved deeper into the nave, his flashlight sweeping across damp, moss-cloaked walls. The air grew heavier, choked with mildew and the acrid tang of old ash. He stopped at the altar, brushing a hand across the thick blanket of dust, then froze. A rustling noise echoed from the far end of the church. His chest tightened. The beam jerked wildly. A shape darted between the ruined pews. Who's there? Nathaniel's voice cracked, trembling against the silence. The shadow suddenly lunged forward. Nathaniel staggered back, pulse hammering, nearly dropping his light. The beam caught a face, haggard, familiar. Eyes bright, hair unkempt, a camera swinging from his neck. Eli? Nathaniel gasped, scarcely believing. The other man stiffened, then let out a shaky laugh. Nathaniel? Christ, I thought you were something else. The tension eased for a heartbeat, though the dread clung stubbornly around them both. Eli Turner, an old friend, once a fellow traveler on field expeditions, was here, inside the rotting shell of St. Aurelia. What are you doing here? Nathaniel asked, voice low. I could ask you the same. Eli raised his camera and snapped a photo. They say this place is haunted, I figured I'd see if my lens could catch anything strange. Didn't expect to find you chasing whatever dark faith you're still obsessed with." Nathaniel didn't answer. He only gestured at the altar. "Do you see it? The wax stains. They've never really gone out." Eli frowned, half skeptical, half uneasy. But before he could reply, a sharp crack rang out, like flame catching a wick. A faint, sickly glow flickered across the altar. A lone candle shivered into flame, though Nathaniel knew he had not touched it. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the ruined walls. Eli lowered his camera, his face gone pale. You see it too?" "Yes," Nathaniel whispered. Wind shrieked through the broken windows, splintering into a chorus of whispers. They swirled around the two men, hundreds of voices rising and falling in a tongue that did not belong to this world. Every syllable scraped at their skin, raising gooseflesh. Eli gripped Nathaniel's shoulder. We should get out, now." But Nathaniel shook his head, his eyes alight with fevered conviction. "No, Eli. This is the proof. The covenant never ended, don't you see? They sealed their souls into these candles." The single flame flared violently, casting light across cracked walls. Within those fissures, Nathaniel thought he saw faces, dozens of them, pressed against the stone, their mouths moving soundlessly. Eli turned away, hands trembling around his camera, no longer daring to press the shutter. Silence thickened. Then came the sound of wax dripping, tick, tick, like blood falling onto the cold stone floor. Eli edged back. "Nathaniel, if you still have any sense left, we should leave before—" His words cut off. The entire nave erupted in light. Dozens of invisible candles roared into flame, their jaundiced glow painting the fractured ceiling. In that glow, shapes coalesced, pale figures lining the central aisle, standing as though in a funeral procession that had never ended. Nathaniel clutched his recorder tight. Eli swallowed hard, eyes wide in horror. Both men knew in that instant they were no longer observers. They had become unwilling guests at a ritual that had never ceased. Now, the jaundiced glow of dozens of candles filled the nave. Their light gave no warmth. Instead, it chilled Nathaniel to the marrow, as though he were standing inside a morgue. Eli gripped his arm tightly, eyes wide, no longer curious but stricken with absolute terror. Along both sides of the aisle, hazy figures began to stir. They had no faces, only man-shaped husks wrapped in wax, chests hollowed inward, arms curled tight like melting effigies. Each movement cracked and splintered like brittle wood. One figure broke away from the front row. The flame on the altar candle bent toward it, as if feeding it with breath. Layer by layer, its skin peeled away, revealing a glistening, pulsing substance beneath. Nathaniel and Eli watched as the thing warped, flesh winding and knotting into the form of a living candle. Its arms stretched into waxen branches split with fissures, and from its mouth spewed molten wax, hissing as it struck the stone floor. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. Eli let out a strangled cry, stumbling back against a splintered pew. His camera slipped from his hands and shattered on the stone, forgotten. The flesh candle flared, a crimson flame erupting from its brow. Its light made the other figures quiver in unison, as though awaiting command. From its warped body came a groan, layered, 100 voices weeping at once from a single throat. "Oh God, oh God," Eli whispered, clutching Nathaniel's shoulder. But Nathaniel could not look away. Terror bound him, yet some dreadful fascination held him still. He listened and realized the groaning carried words. Not random sounds, but names. The names of Saint Aurelia's villagers, one by one, called from the dark. Another candle on the altar flared to life. A second figure stepped free, its skin cracking, wax pouring down its body. The stench of burning flesh rolled through the nave. Eli gagged, pressing his hand to his mouth to keep from vomiting. The whispers swelled, clearer now, their chant unmistakable. More to be lit. New blood for the light. Nathaniel fumbled for his notebook, scrawling frantic notes with a trembling hand. Eli snatched at it, hissing, "You're insane. This isn't something to record. It's something to escape." But before their argument could rise, the two flesh candles lurched forward. Beneath their feet, wax sizzled like acid, eating through the flagstones. A droplet spattered onto a fallen pew. Within seconds, the wood sagged into ash. "Run!" Eli screamed. They bolted down the narrow aisle, the sickly glow dogging their steps. Nathaniel slammed into a crumbling wall, his hand striking a small wooden door. Without a thought, he shoved it open. Both men tumbled inside and wrenched it shut behind them. The small chamber reeked of scorched wax, heavier than the air outside. Their breaths rasped in their throats, seared as though they had swallowed fire. Nathaniel's flashlight swept the room, then froze. Before them lay a circle of candles, dozens of them, encircling a stone altar. But these were no wax tapers. Each was a human finger, bone and flesh fused together, fingertips burning with steady red flame. Eli broke into sobs, voice trembling. "Nathaniel, this isn't a covenant. This is hell." Outside, fists pounded the door. The flesh candles had found them. The flames atop the altar suddenly roared skyward, illuminating ancient sigils carved into the walls, a curse that had never been broken. And in that moment, Nathaniel understood. They had not stumbled upon a relic. They had awakened a covenant that promised no escape. Yee! Footsteps thundered through the darkened church. Nathaniel dragged Eli forward, breath ragged, the stench of burning wax clinging thick in the air. Behind them, the wax figures dragged themselves across the floor, hissing softly like candles cracking as they melted. They burst into the confessional, only to see the walls splitting, wax seeping through like congealed blood. A hand seized Eli's shoulder. Nathaniel swung his flashlight like a club, shattering it, and pulled his friend onward. The nave yawned open before them, and the scene had changed. Every pew was filled with waxen shapes, all heads turned toward the altar. Upon it stood a single colossal candle, burning crimson, its light bleeding across the stone like liquid fire. Before it, a melting priest shape preached, voice booming against the fractured walls. The covenant has never ended. The flame must be fed with souls. The heat scorched their skin raw. The congregation of candles began to rise, staggering forward, limbs splitting, their bodies dripping foul black resin. Nathaniel clenched the drawings in his hand. The ink had bled scarlet, revealing a sigil of a broken candle beneath the altar. His mind reeled with clarity. The only escape was to shatter the seal. "The crypt beneath the altar!" he shouted, dragging Eli through the swaying throng. The wax creatures grasped at them, shells splitting, oozing a stench of rot and ash. At the altar's base, Nathaniel's palm found a hollowed stone. He pressed hard. The floor trembled, splitting wide to reveal a spiral staircase plunging into the depths. The priest's shape roared. From the great red candle lashed tendrils of molten wax, cracking down like whips, searing the air inches from their heads. Without hesitation, Nathaniel and Eli hurled themselves down the stairwell, heat pursuing like a living tide. Darkness thickened around them until, at the bottom, a monolithic stone door loomed. Carved upon its surface was the image of an inverted burning candle. From its fissures seeped the sound of countless voices, whispering, sobbing, cursing, begging. The door groaned as it began to open. A cold wind surged through, snuffing out the light behind them. Nathaniel felt the pull of inevitability. Beyond this threshold lay the true heart of Saint Aurelia, where the fate of the Covenant, sealed for centuries, would finally be decided. Hi, Damnation. The stone door shuddered open, and darkness surged out like a flood of ice. Nathaniel and Eli stepped inside, their hearts pounding in their chests. Beneath their feet, the floor was split with jagged fissures, from which oozed thick, red wax, like blood boiled into liquid. At the chamber's center rose a colossal candle, vast as an ancient tree. Its flame burned crimson, casting a sickly glow across the cavern. Around its waxen trunk were fused human forms, mouths frozen open, eyes dripping like molten wax, their bodies rigid yet trembling as though still alive. From them came low, overlapping moans, a grotesque chorus of suffering. Eli staggered back, voice trembling. Nathaniel clutched the drawing, the sigil of the broken candle glowing like a wound. He understood. This was the root of the Covenant. The blood candle, devouring the villagers' souls to fuel the sect's unholy power. As long as it burned, the ritual would never end. "We have to extinguish it," Nathaniel whispered, though his breath shook with fear. They stepped forward, but the priest's voice echoed from every wall, thick and dripping like wax. "None shall break the covenant. This flame is your blood." The monstrous candle flared, tendrils of red wax uncoiling and lashing down. They wrapped around Eli's legs, dragging him toward the trunk. He screamed, thrashing, but the wax was as unyielding as iron chains. Nathaniel lunged, pulling desperately, but the candle clutched tighter, hungrier. "Go!" Eli shouted, eyes wild with both terror and resolve. "You have to destroy it, even if I don't make it." Nathaniel shook his head, tears brimming, but Eli shoved him hard toward the flame. In that instant, Nathaniel understood. Only a final sacrifice could end it. Eli lifted his face, his eyes gleaming in the hellish red light. "End it." And then he let go, surrendering himself to the candle. His body was swallowed whole, the flame surging higher with a shriek that rattled the earth. The chamber convulsed. Nathaniel seized the moment. He tore the last relic from his pack, a flask of sacred oil scavenged from the archives, and hurled it into the heart of the fire. A deafening roar split the air. The blood candle screamed, fissures ripping through its body as imprisoned souls burst free, wailing in a torrent of cold wind. The light collapsed into itself, plunging the cavern into utter blackness. When Nathaniel awoke, he lay among the rubble, outside Saint Aurelia. The night sky loomed above, moonless, silent. No Eli, no moans, only the crushing stillness of a grave. He staggered to his feet, his hands caked in hardened wax, a mark that would never fade. The crypt, the candle, all gone, along with Eli. But deep within the silence, he caught the faintest whisper riding the wind. The covenant is not finished. Nathaniel shivered. Somewhere, in the shadows of Appalachia, the blood flame still waited for another sacrifice to awaken it once more. Pixie. In the rotting carcass of an industrial city, humanity suffers a grotesque affliction. Blood hardens into glass, and veins toll like brittle bells when they fracture. Those who collapse do not bleed, they shatter, their bodies unraveling into shards of crystal that chime a mournful hymn as they scatter. But beneath the city's foundations, buried deeper than steel and stone, something older still awakens, a creature whose heart beats in living minutes. Now, Marcus Hale, a maintenance engineer in the industrial sector, had long grown accustomed to the stench of burning oil and the groan of failing machines. But lately, a new sound haunted the air, a faint, chilling chime like glass splintering in the wind. The first time he heard it was in the old foundry, where his longtime co-worker Joseph suddenly crumpled mid-shift. Joseph's body convulsed, his skin pale and drenched in sweat. Rushing to help, Marcus felt it through the man's soaked shirt. Veins stiff as wire, vibrating under his touch. A pale blue glow traced along Joseph's neck, translucent and glimmering like crystal. "Help me," Joseph rasped. Then came the crack. His arm bent unnaturally, snapping not like bone, but like brittle glass. Marcus staggered back, horrified, as Joseph's body fissured, splinter by splinter. No blood flowed, only a crystalline sheen spreading through his flesh. Within seconds, his friend disintegrated into 1,000 shards, scattering across the floor in a ringing cascade like a funeral bell. The other workers fled, their screams ricocheting down the iron hallways. But Marcus remained frozen, staring at the jagged remnants of a man who had once laughed beside him over late-night shifts. No breath, no blood, only silence, and the terrible hymn of glass breaking. In the days that followed, the city descended into quiet chaos. Whispers spread like wildfire of those who walked with chiming veins,
We have to get out of
who
here.
fell and shattered into nothing. Officials denied everything. Newspapers ran blank, but the streets emptied after dusk. Doors were bolted, windows veiled, and eyes averted as if the sickness could spread through a glance. Marcus could not sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, the sound returned. Joseph's collapse echoing in his chest, shards ringing in his skull. Worse still, on sleepless nights, when the wind whistled through the rusted vents atop the factories, he heard something deeper. A rhythm, a strange melody, reverberating from far beneath the earth. A thought rooted itself within him, unwelcome but unshakable. Joseph's death was no accident, and the plague was no natural disease. Something was hidden below the city, older and more terrible than rust or stone. And Marcus knew if he did not uncover it, his own veins would soon toll like glass bells. Nananiao, tea. The city hospital reeked of disinfectant, yet beneath the acrid sting lingered something colder, the faint tang of rust, mingled with the dust of ground glass. Marcus had come to claim Joseph's body, but the morgue lay barren. The record was blunt, patient fractured, no remains preserved. In the silent corridor, a voice broke the stillness. You lost someone too, in the shattering? He turned to find a gaunt woman in a white coat. Her eyes, ringed with sleepless shadows, burned with an intensity that unsettled more than comforted. She introduced herself, Dr. Iris Ward, resident physician. Without waiting for reply, she tugged him into a cramped laboratory where yellow light flickered over rows of vials. Inside the glass, blood was no longer blood. In one vial, liquid once red had grown translucent, flecked with jagged shards that caught the light like splinters of ice. Iris raised it carefully. This isn't coagulation, she whispered. It's restructuring. Blood turning into something akin to silica. No virus, no bacteria, as if the human body is learning to become something else. Marcus' skin crawled. The faint chime returned in his skull, echoing like a memory of breaking. Then the sound grew louder. From the ward next door erupted a chorus of clattering bells. They rushed into chaos. 5 patients screamed at once, bodies convulsing, veins glowing like molten glass beneath their skin. Then came the fractures, sharp, merciless, deafening. In an instant, their forms burst apart, crystalline shards cascading through the air, painting the corridor in a rain of glittering death. Noses scattered, windows shattered. Iris stood paralyzed, but Marcus dragged her back, shielding her from the storm of fragments. When at last the ringing dimmed, only a sparkling dust coated the floor, shimmering like frost beneath the lights. Iris's breath trembled. This can't be illness. It spreads another way, and I think the source lies beneath the sewer veins, where the old bedrock cuts through the city. Marcus glanced down at his own hand. A shallow cut still seeped red from the shards, but in the dim glow he caught a glint of translucence threading through the blood. His pulse thundered. The city was becoming an instrument for something vast and unseen. And if he and Iris failed to uncover it, every heartbeat would toll like glass bells until nothing remained but a symphony of ruin. Nawa. Rain slicked the city that night, turning the streets into broken mirrors beneath jaundiced lamps. Marcus and Iris followed a faded address buried in the patient files. Samuel Kerr, a sewer worker, the sole survivor of an accident that had reduced his crew to glass dust. They found him in a damp boarding room at the city's edge. Samuel was gaunt, eyes bloodshot, fingers twitching as though keeping time to an unheard rhythm. When Marcus introduced himself, Samuel only laughed. A rasping, stony sound. You hear it too, don't you? That ringing, it never leaves. His voice dropped to a whisper as Iris pressed him about the day of the accident. Samuel told of drilling into an unfamiliar vein of rock deep beneath the tunnels. From it spilled a cold blue glow, and then the singing began. Not human, not words, just the crystalline resonance of glass upon glass. His fellow workers froze, eyes hollow, until one by one they shattered. Samuel alone had fled, but ever since the song gnawed at his skull, louder with every night. As he spoke, Marcus caught it too. A faint tapping from beneath the warped floorboards, measured, relentless. Samuel grinned, pointing downward. It's singing for us, even here. The 3 descended into the sewers. The air reeked of damp stone and something sharper, the dry bite of powdered glass. Their flashlights carved tunnels of light across the walls, where veins of crystal jutted from the rock like arteries of frozen fire. Each step sent echoes bouncing through the dark, and from the depths came an answering chord, as if unseen hands were plucking strings woven from bone. Samuel buckled, clutching his skull, muttering prayers that melted into melody. Iris clung to Marcus, her voice barely a breath. It doesn't just kill, it's turning them into part of the song. Marcus stared into the blackness where the music swelled clearer, vibrating through stone and marrow alike. The chill in his bones told him they had crossed into something's domain, something not of flesh, not of man. And the symphony of glass was only beginning. Indeed. The deeper they ventured into the mine, the more the world above seemed like a forgotten dream. The walls glistened with moisture, streaked with veins of black ore that pulsed faintly, as though the rock itself had a heartbeat. The narrow passageways twisted endlessly, sometimes collapsing into suffocating tunnels, other times widening into caverns where the silence felt almost alive. Mark's lantern trembled in his grip, the flame quivering as if it feared what lay ahead. Shadows bent unnaturally along the jagged stone, stretching and contorting into forms that did not belong to the human world. Evelyn trailed her fingers along the damp wall, her breath shallow. She could feel something, an unseen rhythm, guiding her deeper, luring her forward with the persistence of a whispered command. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. A stench rose, iron, rot, and something far older. The ground beneath them was littered with scraps of rusted tools, helmets split down the middle, skeletal remains half buried in shale. Time had not eroded the violence etched into those bones. Some still bore the marks of desperate clawing, as if the miners had tried to tear through the earth itself in their final moments. Then came the sound. A low murmur at first, indistinct, like wind brushing against the stone. But it grew, layer upon layer of voices, men, women, children, rising in a chorus too vast to belong to the living. They spoke in a tongue neither Evelyn nor Mark could comprehend, yet the meaning slithered through their minds, bypassing reason. Surrender. Become. Join us. Mark pressed his palms to his ears, but the voices only grew louder, drilling straight into his skull. Evelyn, however, stood transfixed, her eyes glazed, her lips parting as if to echo the chant. Her lantern light flickered, nearly extinguished, and in the dim glow, the walls began to move. Faces, countless, twisted, agonized, pressed outward from the rock, their mouths opening and closing in unison with the voices. The descent had ceased to be a path. It was no longer a mine but a threshold, and whatever awaited below was not content to remain buried. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The air churned, thick and suffocating, as if the mine itself had begun to breathe. In the center lay a pit, a wound in the earth, glowing faintly with a light that was not fire, but something raw, primordial. The voices rose from it, a deafening storm of whispers that battered the walls and rattled the bones of the dead. Evelyn stumbled forward, drawn to the edge, her eyes reflecting the pit's glow. Mark grabbed her arm, pulling her back with all his strength, but she resisted, her face slack and unrecognizable, as though something else had claimed her. The ground quaked beneath them, shards of stone falling like teeth from the ceiling. From within the pit, a shape stirred. At first, it was only a suggestion, a ripple in the glow, a distortion of space, but then it began to take form. Vast limbs, slick with black ichor, reached upward, and a face, eyeless yet seeing, pressed against the veil that separated earth from the void. Its mouth opened, and the chamber filled with a sound that was not a roar, but the breaking of worlds. Mark's lantern shattered. Darkness swallowed them, save for the pit's sickly glow. He dragged Evelyn away, her feet dragging. Her voice now a chorus that matched the whispers. She screamed words not her own, each syllable striking him like a blade. The chamber tilted, reality itself buckling under the weight of what clawed its way free. They ran, through collapsing tunnels, past walls that bled shadows, past bones that reached out with grasping fingers. Behind them, the pit widened, its glow spilling through the mine like veins of fire. The voices swelled to a crescendo, drowning out thought, drowning out fear, until all that remained was surrender. At the final passage, Mark forced Evelyn ahead of him, shoving her through the narrow gap. He turned back once, just long enough to see the rising form fill the chamber, its countless mouths opening in unison. His scream joined theirs as the earth swallowed him whole. Above ground, Evelyn collapsed on the barren soil. The mine sealed itself with a thunderous roar, leaving only silence in its wake. But in her chest, the whispers lived on, soft, steady, patient. The awakening had begun. Ow. Since the mid-20th century, whispers have lingered about a carnival that vanished in the 1930s. Whenever a blood moon climbs the sky, a strange music seeps across the abandoned fields, discordant, lilting, impossible to place. The curious who pass through the gate will find lights glowing, rides turning, and performers smiling with hollow mirth. But every game demands its price, and the final prize is to become an eternal act in the carnival of shadows. Wendun. Alex Carter was no stranger to strange rumors. As a freelance journalist, he had chased stories of haunted houses, lake monsters, even the lingering curses of forgotten towns. Yet, the tale that drew him into the Appalachian hills unsettled him more than the rest. A carnival that vanished in the 1930s, reappearing only beneath the glow of a blood moon. He did not come alone. Beside him was Maggie Holt, a photographer who had followed him through many hunts for the bizarre. Together they drove the worn car along winding mountain roads, the horizon bleeding red, as if the sky itself were leaking thin, diluted blood. The field where the carnival was said to rise stretched out in desolate silence, nothing but brittle grass the color of ash. No banners, no stalls, no trace of celebration, only a silence so heavy it seemed to swallow their breath. Alex checked his watch. The lunar eclipse was minutes away from its darkest point. They waited. A sudden wind swept the plain, lifting dust into twisting columns. From the emptiness came a sound, low, warped, unmistakably brass, as though a trumpet were groaning from deep underground. Red light washed across the field, and from nowhere a gate materialized, its frame a curve of rusted black iron. Above it hung a sign that shimmered unnaturally, Black Carnival. Alex held his breath. Maggie raised her camera, but through the lens there was nothing solid. Only shapes writhing like shadows that refused to be captured, as though the place rejected being recorded. Beyond the gate, faint lights flickered. A wooden carousel creaked to life, horses moving in slow circles. Children's laughter echoed faintly, though the field was empty of children. The air was thick with sweetness, like spun sugar left too long in the heat, clashing with the sharp tang of something metallic and rotten. Alex felt his pulse hammer in his throat. This was no folk tale. Something real had risen from the void before them. He turned to Maggie. No words passed, only a single grim nod. The gate creaked open, and their first step inside the black carnival rang out like a binding vow, one from which no one ever turned back. Nee. The air inside the carnival was heavy with sweetness, but the sweetness choked like smoke, burnt sugar laced with the bite of rust. Along the midway, booths glowed with sickly yellow bulbs, colors bright at first glance, yet collapsing on closer inspection into warped wood and peeling paint. From somewhere unseen, a brass band wheezed out broken notes, the melody lurching between low groans and sharp shrieks, never finding rhythm. Out of the haze, a towering man appeared, cloaked in black and white stripes. His face was hidden beneath a cracked mask, only his eyes exposed, burning like furnace coals. When he spoke, his voice rattled through the air as if funneled through a broken loudspeaker. Welcome, new guests. Come play with us. Every game carries its own reward. Alex and Maggie exchanged a wary glance. Curiosity gnawed at Alex, pulling him toward the ring toss booth. Rows of glass bottles waited, their throats impossibly narrow. He tossed the first ring, and against all odds, it landed. A stuffed bear, threadbare and sagging, was pressed into his hand. But as Alex gripped the prize, pain tore through his finger. His pinky nail snapped free, blood welling. The bear absorbed it instantly, its fabric staining dark red before drying, the color sinking into its seams like a permanent scar. Maggie recoiled, but the masked man only let out a jagged laugh. Every prize must be paid for. You have already agreed. Defiant, Maggie stepped to the strength tester. She swung the mallet down, and the gauge's needle shot to the top. Lights burst in a sudden flare. Her prize was a porcelain doll, already fractured with hairline cracks. The moment she lifted it, her palm split open, as though the skin had been peeled away in a single strip. Blood smeared across the doll's porcelain face, seeping into its lips until they gleamed crimson. Alex yanked her back, his heart hammering. He understood now. Every carnival game here was fed by flesh and blood. The prizes were no trinkets at all, but parasites feeding on what the players lost. From deeper within the carnival, the music surged, drums and horns, urgent, commanding them forward. The masked man spread his arms like a grotesque master of ceremonies, voice booming with glee. This is only the beginning. The true performance awaits. Ahead, a rotting wooden door creaked open, revealing a funhouse of mirrors. Thousands of distorted reflections stared back, bending and twisting like bodies drowned in red water. The blood moon's glow poured through the glass, every reflection rippling as though alive. A chill crawled up Alex's spine. The carnival was tightening its grip, and with every step, they had already wagered their own flesh. Neem. Eyes. The mirror tent sealed shut behind Alex and Maggie, as if an unseen hand had slammed the door from outside. Dim crimson light seeped through the heavy canvas, scattering into endless shards across the mirrors. With every step, their reflections multiplied, dozens, then hundreds, stretching long, twisting grotesquely into shapes that no longer resembled human forms. The carnival's music faded into the distance, replaced by a soft undercurrent, like whispers bleeding from the glass itself. Alex halted, pulse racing. In the mirror's warped reflection, his face was no longer whole. One side splintered, his eyes black and glossy like glass on the verge of shattering. Maggie pressed onward, but her footsteps dragged across something sharp. Alex looked down and froze. The ground was no longer carpeted with dust and cloth, but covered in jagged fragments of glass, each shard streaked with dried blood. Maggie trembled, clutching the porcelain doll from before. The doll stirred in her hands, its cracked eyes fluttering open as if waking from a dream. Suddenly, a thunder of applause erupted. Both of them spun around. At the far end of the mirrored hall, a stage revealed itself, lit by a pallid glow. Dozens of spectators sat in silence. Their bodies were rigid, skin pale, eyes locked wide open. At first, they seemed like wax figures, but as Alex drew closer, dread curdled in his stomach. They were real, human.pie. Their souls had been hollowed out, leaving only husks. A few still breathed shallowly, lips twitching as if to beg for help, though no sound escaped. Maggie stumbled back, colliding with a mirror. The surface rippled, and another figure appeared, her reflection but hollow-eyed, its mouth slashed open in a grin that reached ear to ear. The reflection thrust its hand through the glass, clawing her skin. Purple welts spread across her arm, as though her very soul was being torn away. Maggie screamed, but the sound warped and dissolved, devoured by the maze. Alex dragged her free, only to find the stage empty. The silent audience had vanished, leaving behind rows of rotting wooden seats, stained with dark patches of blood. The air thickened, pressing down with the weight of countless unseen eyes. A laugh boomed from above, the laugh of the masked master of ceremonies. The audience is ready. The next act is yours. At once, the mirrors blazed with light, then cracked in unison. From the fractures burst blackened limbs, jointed and sharp, like the broken pieces of marionettes clawing their way out. The maze shuddered, splinters raining down, the shriek of breaking glass colliding with the chaos of carnival music. Alex fought wildly, blood smearing the mirrors as his hands were torn open. Wherever his blood touched, the shards ignited, glowing like fire. Maggie swung the porcelain doll at the creature's grasping arms, each impact unleashing a shrill, childlike wail that pierced the air. They pushed forward, desperation fueling their escape, until at last a narrow gap appeared, a passage out. They hurled themselves through it, tumbling onto damp, cold earth. Behind them, the mirror tent convulsed, then collapsed inward, vanishing into a void of nothingness. But the laughter remained. The MC's voice coiled through the air like prophecy, echoing inside their skulls. No one leaves before the carnival is finished. Yeah. They stumbled out of the mirror tent, breath ragged, their clothes smeared with blood and glass dust. Before them spread a vast square at the heart of the carnival, bathed in the crimson blaze of the blood moon. At its center lay a wide circle, etched in black ash and dried blood, encircling a tall wooden post, weathered, splintered, unmistakably an execution stake. Figures in black cloaks began to emerge, one by one. Each wore a cracked jester mask, teeth rotting and yellow beneath the fractured grins. They gathered slowly, their movements deliberate, swaying in rhythm as though locked in some grotesque dance. The carnival's music shifted into a funereal pounding, drums dull and hollow, like the heartbeat of the damned. Alex and Maggie crouched behind a decayed booth, watching. A young man was bound to the post, a filthy rag stuffed between his teeth. Blood trickled from his hands, raw flesh torn where the skin had been stripped away. His face was ashen, eyes wide with the last desperate plea of a man who already knew there would be no rescue. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward, voice booming, drawn out, reverberating like a sermon from beneath the earth. The blood moon rises. The pact is renewed. Blood for soul. Soul for endless delight. The crowd echoed the words in unison, a chant, ancient and steady, vibrating through the bones. Alex felt his veins turn cold. This was no game. This was ritual, older than memory, fed by sacrifice. The carnival lived, and it feasted on the living. The bound man thrashed as another masked figure approached. The weapon it carried was not a blade, not an axe, but a rod glowing with a sickly neon red, pulsing like a vein of fire. The rod pierced his chest. Light burst from the wound, not the light of blood, but the tearing brilliance of a soul being ripped free. His body collapsed, hollowed, nothing more than a husk. The crowd erupted in cheers, laughter clanging and brittle as iron scraping stone. Maggie shook, tears shimmering in her eyes. Alex gripped her hand, whispering hoarsely, "We have to escape before it's us." But even as he spoke, dread cut through him. The gate they had entered by was gone. Around them stretched only rows of booths, endless, a labyrinth with no way out. From above, the MG's voice descended, sharp and merciless, each word a decree. The newcomers have played their first game. The pact has claimed them. The next act is their sacrifice. As one, the cloaked congregation turned, dozens of cracked masks locking onto the shadows where Alex and Maggie hid. The sound of footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, pounding like the carnival's own heart. Alex drew in a sharp breath, clutching the blood-stained teddy bear, the cursed prize that had already tasted him. Maggie held the porcelain doll, its glassy eyes glittering as if infused with the soul it had devoured. They both knew now. The games had carried them too far. They were no longer spectators. Under the blood moon, they were the chosen offering. Now! Ow! The drums pounded like a colossal heart, their rhythm echoing across the carnival. The masked crowd closed in, hollow eyes fixed upon Alex and Maggie. At the center of the square, the execution post rose again, waiting for its next sacrifice. Alex gripped Maggie's trembling hand, feeling her fear vibrate through his own bones. He knew there was no escape. The gate was gone, the carnival sealed tight around them, like the jaws of a vast predator. The prizes they carried now pulsed with menace. The blood-stained teddy bear, the porcelain doll with burning eyes. They whispered in voices only he and Maggie could hear, urging them toward the circle of sacrifice. The masked mech emerged, towering, his shadow engulfing the square. His voice thundered, drawn out and merciless. The audience waits. The carnival demands a new act. And you, Alex, you will light the stage. Two cloaked figures lunged, seizing Alex in arms cold as iron. He fought, thrashing wildly, but their grip was unbreakable. Maggie screamed, rushing forward only to be hurled aside. The porcelain doll shattered in her hands, and from its broken shell poured the shrill cries of children, echoing into the darkness. They bound Alex to the post. The blood moon blazed down, painting his skin in a suffocating red glow. The MC lifted the glowing rod, burning like a coal ripped from hell, and pressed it to Alex's chest. Agony ripped through him, but Alex did not scream. His gaze locked on Maggie, despair and resolve mingling in his eyes. "Run!" he roared, his voice folding into the thunder of drums. Light erupted. Blood and soul tore free, unraveling into ribbons of crimson that spiraled through the air. His body convulsed, splitting open, bones snapping, flesh melting into molten wax that dripped and hardened into something new. When the glow faded, Alex was gone. In his place stood a towering carnival effigy, a grotesque figure with hollow eyes and a smile carved impossibly wide. The crowd erupted, applause crashing like thunder, laughter jagged and metallic. The new performer bowed low, a grotesque parody of gratitude, as though Alex himself were welcoming the audience to his debut. Maggie collapsed to her knees, tears flooding her face. But the carnival allowed her no time to grieve. The torches guttered out, plunging the square into darkness. When light returned, the crowd was gone. The post had vanished. She was alone, stranded in the middle of a barren, windswept field. At her feet lay the teddy bear, its stitches soaked dark with Alex's blood. Its button eyes glowed faintly, like embers refusing to die. And Maggie understood. Alex had not escaped. He had been claimed, forever bound to the carnival. Far away, faint music stirred once more, Calliope notes curling through the night air. A promise that when the blood moon returned, the black carnival would open its gates again, waiting for the next curious soul to wander inside. All night,